Hey everyone, we're diving into a topic today that's really got my wheels turning, AI and education. You sent over some super interesting stuff for us to unpack. Like check out this MJR Learning Academy, their website's slick. Got to give them that. They're all about getting teachers up to speed with AI, which, okay, I'm here for it, but it's a lot.
Yeah, it can feel like drinking from a fire hose,
Yeah.
right? Especially with so much hype around AI right now.
For sure. And that's what I like about pairing the MJR site with this article on skills for educators in the age of AI. It's like MJR saying, jump in, the future is now. And the article's like, whoa, hold your horses, let's make sure you're ready.
I think that's a smart approach, actually, because AI isn't just a fad that's going to disappear. It's fundamentally changing how we live, work, and, how we learn.
Totally. Okay, so the MJR website, they're offering AI-assisted tutoring, which, okay, cool. But they've also got these things called GPT assistants. They even gave them names like, get this, Smart Aid and Prompt Prodigy.
Catchy, right.
Very futuristic.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering, what does that actually look like in the classroom?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right? And I think the MJR site, while heavy on the marketing, does touch on something important. They're tapping into this idea of personalized learning, which has been a buzzword in education for years. But AI might actually be the key to making it a reality.
Okay, so elaborate on that. What do you mean?
Think about it. Imagine a tool like SmartAid that not only helps you plan lessons, but can actually adapt those lessons in real time based on a student's individual needs.
Now that's what I'm talking about. That's next level stuff. But it also makes you think, if a tool can do all that, what's the role of the teacher? And that's something this article really digs into. It's not just about having AI tools. It's about educators having specific AI skills to use those tools effectively.
Absolutely. And that's something that often gets overlooked in all the excitement. It's not enough to just have a prompt prodigy at your fingertips. You need to understand how it works, its limitations, and when it's appropriate to use.
So it's like you wouldn't give a kid a calculator and say, go do math, without teaching them the fundamentals first.
Exactly. It's about equipping educators with the knowledge and skills to use these tools critically and effectively, not just pushing buttons.
And that's where those AI skills the article talks about come into play. Like, they highlighted some pretty impressive stats, by the way. Did you catch these? They said something like a 35% increase in, well, get this, AI literacy.
Which makes sense. The more you learn about something, the more literate you become in it. But it also highlights the growing need for these skills.
Right. And they said that teachers using these tools are saving an average of 3.5 hours per week on lesson planning. That's huge.
It is significant. And it speaks to this idea that AI tools aren't about replacing teachers, but about augmenting their abilities. Imagine what you could do with an extra 3.5 hours in your week.
Right. That's more time for working with individual students, for exploring creative projects, for, having a life outside of school.
Exactly. And that's ultimately the goal, right? To create a more balanced and effective learning environment for both students and teachers.
Okay, so let's say you're a teacher and you're just wrapping your head around all of this. Where do you even begin?
That's where that article really comes in handy. They get into the specifics of what those AI skills look like. They break down some of the key skills that educators need. And honestly, it's not as intimidating as it might sound initially.
Yeah, like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so one of the big ones is data literacy.
Data literacy. So like being able to read a spreadsheet.
Well, it's more than just reading a spreadsheet. It's about being able to understand and analyze the data that these AI tools are using, right? Because if you don't understand the data going in, you won't be able to effectively evaluate the results coming out.
That makes sense. So it's like knowing how to ask the right questions of the data and then being able to make sense of the answers you get.
Exactly. And then there's this other idea that talk about algorithmic thinking, which is fascinating.
Algorithmic thinking. Okay, now that sounds intimidating.
It's not as complicated as it sounds, I promise. Basically, it's about understanding the logic behind how these algorithms work so you can use them more effectively.
So it's like being able to peek under the hood and understand the engine that's driving the car.
Yes. A perfect analogy. Because if you understand how the algorithm is making decisions, you can better tailor your approach, troubleshoot issues, and even identify potential biases.
Bias. That's a good point. I feel like we need to talk more about that, the potential downsides of AI in education. But before we do, I want to hear more about these skills in action. Did the article give any real-world examples?
Yeah, actually, they had a really interesting example from UCL, a university in London.
Oh, okay, cool. UCL.
They've got this program where they're training teachers on how to integrate AI into their classrooms. And what's really cool is that they're not just teaching the how-to of using the tools, but they're also exploring the ethical implications and the impact on different learning styles.
Okay, so, what does that actually look like? I mean, can you give me a concrete example?
Sure. Imagine a history teacher using an AI tool to create a lesson on, say, the American Revolution. They could use SmartAid to find relevant primary sources, create interactive timelines, and even generate different types of assessment questions tailored to different learning styles.
Whoa, hold on. SmartAid can do all that. See, this is what trips me out about AI. It's like, where does the tool end and the teaching begin?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's something that we need to be talking about more, but I think the key here is that these tools, powerful as they are still just that. Tools. They're meant to assist and augment the teacher, not replace them.
Okay, I like that. Assist, not replace. But it still makes you wonder, if these tools are doing so much of the heavy lifting, what's left for the teacher?
That's where the human element becomes even more important. Because no algorithm can replace the nuanced understanding that a teacher brings to the classroom. The ability to read a student's facial expression, to offer a word of encouragement at just the right moment, to create a sense of community and belonging.
To know when to scrap the lesson plan and just go with the flow.
Exactly. Those are things that AI simply can't replicate.
You're right, and it reminds me of something else the article touched on. The idea that AI can help teachers better identify students who might be struggling or who need extra support. Is that kind of where the data analysis part comes in?
Absolutely. Think about all the data teachers collect every day, right? Grades, attendance, even things like how often a student participates in class. AI can help analyze all that data and identify patterns that might not be visible to the human eye.
So it's like having an early warning system.
Exactly. It allows teachers to intervene earlier, provide targeted support, and hopefully prevent students from falling through the cracks.
Okay, I'm seeing the potential here. I really am. But I have to admit, even with all these potential benefits, I still get a little wary when I hear about AI doing all this stuff. You know what I mean? It's like, is there anything about this whole AI and education thing that keeps you up at night?
It's not so much that it keeps me up at night, but I do think there are some really important considerations to keep in mind. Like, one of the big ones is access and equity. Will all students have equal access to these AI tools?
Right.
And how do we ensure that these tools are being used to bridge the achievement gap, not widen it?
That's huge.
These are questions that we really need to be asking ourselves.
Yeah. And I also wonder, we've talked a lot about the practical applications of AI in education, but what about the bigger picture? What does all of this mean for the future of learning itself? Are we headed towards a world where robots are teaching our kids?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And if I had a crystal ball, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And if I had a crystal ball, I'd tell you. But I think what we're looking at is a pretty fundamental shift, not just in how we teach, but in what it actually means to be educated in the 21st century,
Okay, now you've really got me thinking. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about it. For a long time, education was mostly about acquiring knowledge, right?
Right.
Like memorizing facts, mastering formulas, that kind of thing.
Right. Rote memorization.
Yeah. And while those things are still important, they're not enough anymore. Not in the age of Google.
Because now you can just, Google the answer to anything.
Exactly. We've got information overload at our fingertips 24/7. So the real skill, the real challenge is knowing how to sift through all that information, figure out what's reliable, think critically, and solve problems that, frankly, we haven't even thought of yet. And that's where AI comes in. It's not just a tool for teaching, it's a tool for learning how to learn.
Okay, I see what you're saying. It's like we're not just preparing students for jobs that don't exist yet. We're preparing them for a world where the very idea of knowing something is constantly shifting.
Exactly. And that requires a totally different kind of education, one that puts things like adaptability, creativity, and critical thinking front and center. And at least for now, those are still skills that humans are way better at than machines.
So it's not about replacing teachers with robots. It's about using AI to help both teachers and students become more adaptable, more creative, more human.
I love that. More human, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? And I think that's got to be the biggest takeaway from all of this. AI is definitely changing the game of education, but it doesn't have to be a threat. It can be a huge opportunity, an opportunity to create a learning experience that's more equitable, more engaging, and ultimately more focused on the human beings at the heart of it all.
That is a fantastic point to end on. So for our listeners who have been on this deep dive with us today, exploring all these different facets of AI in education, what would you say is the one thing they should take away from all of this?
Honestly, Don't be afraid to jump in, explore these new tools, be willing to experiment, make mistakes even. But always remember to keep the human element front and center. Education at its core is about connection. It's about empowering the next generation to create something better. And that's something no algorithm can ever replicate.
Goodness, I said it better myself. Well, you've given us so much to think about today, from the nitty-gritty of tools like SmartAid to these bigger questions about the future of learning itself. And hey, if you're feeling inspired to dive in, that MJR Learning Academy has that Summer 24 discount code. Just saying.
Always good to have options.
Exactly. And remember, this is really just the beginning of the conversation. AI in education is constantly evolving, so stay curious, stay informed, and who knows, maybe we'll have you back for another deep dive soon. Until then, happy exploring, everyone.